Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. There's a serious problem of flooding currently affecting different parts of Lagos and other parts of Nigeria. Much of the problem has been attributed to the yearly release of excess water from an upstream dam on Ogun River, particularly affecting Lagos, one of the tributaries of the Lagos Lagoon. To make matters worse, the rains are still coming down, while the forecasts are not showing any hope of relief anytime soon. In certain areas of Lagos, people paddle their way through inner streets, and this is becoming a common sight. Flooding in the city of Lagos in particular has also been blamed on poor drainage, but there are those who bring the role of non-degradable items like plastic and bottles into the conversation. For a conversation around this and other challenges in one of Africa's fastest growing cities, we are now being joined by Akintunde Disu, an environmental activist and owner of PopBeachClub, a landmark that is designed to portray resistance to plastic pollution in Lagos and its environs. Akintunde Disu, welcome to the morning show.
Good morning.
Lovely to be here.
It's good
Thanks
to have
for having
you here.
me.
Now, the issue of environment, big issue.
Yes.
And you are focusing particularly on plastic pollution.
Yeah.
And that's a big issue, say, for example, in India, where it's, on top of the public conversation, particularly single-use plastic bottles posing a threat to the environment. The United Nations Environment Program says it takes about 1,000 years for these single-use plastics to decompose. Now, how much of a threat is this issue of single-use plastics or multi-grade plastics? How much of a threat is it to the crisis of pollution that we have in Lagos, Ogun, and other parts of Nigeria?
Well, single-use plastic, as you said, lasts for 1,000 years. And as we all know, water cannot flow through plastic. So, first of all, it's quite obvious, the threat of it, that if you have plastic, water is not going to be able to flow freely. And so it's going to compound the whole flooding wherever you find it. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not degrading. So it is a huge threat and something that Lagos State has to look into. But it is just one of the many problems that are facing the whole infrastructure around flooding in Lagos State. We've got plastic and its effect on climate change, which is causing the oceans to rise all across the world. As the oceans rise, the water table rises. As the water table rises, the water from underneath the ground comes up. As that comes up, like a couple of weeks ago when we had the terrible rains and the Ogun River was opened and even the expressway was flooded, what you're getting is that there is nowhere for the water to go because the water table has risen from the floor and the waters from the rivers are flowing into Lagos. And so Lagos is basically sinking. That is what happens. And so the government has to treat this as a matter of urgency to move.
Okay, that sounded extremely scary. Lagos is basically sinking, but
Yes.
that is the harsh reality that we're faced with.
Yes.
And of course, we have government agencies that are supposed to be in charge of plastic pollution and other environmental problems. And one agency, namely, is obviously the Lagos Waste Management Agency, LAMA. How would you rate LAMA's efforts in tackling problems around plastic pollution so far?
Well, this is a new government, so I would not like to, I would not like to speak on what their plans are. But in the last government, in the last dispensation, I know that we went from not being in the list of plastic polluters in the world to being number 8 in ocean polluters in the world. So we have a problem there. We have a big problem that we have to address. But I'd like to say that it is also a solution. When you have a problem and when you're facing this kind of things, you have to look at the solution. And plastic is a huge opportunity and solution for Lagos State right now. Because, you see, plastic has exactly the same energy capacity as petrol. And Lagos State has an energy problem. We've got a plastic problem. We've got a pollution problem. We've got an employment problem. It seems to me that the answer to all these problems is to develop infrastructure that will move the plastic out of the waste system and into the power system, generating power for us, providing employment. And that power can be, we can charge for the power and therefore generating revenue for us. And this is something that can only be done on a government scale. And I can't understand why it's not being done.
Well, you've raised a very important issue about waste management. In some other countries, say for example India, which I mentioned earlier, there is recycling.
Yes.
60% of the single-use plastics are recycled, right? And then the global average is about 20%. Now, do we have that capacity in Nigeria? Do we have the facilities in the state of Lagos? Do you see any kind of commitment to take waste management seriously in Lagos State over the years?
I don't think there is. First of all, Lagos State is a very fast-growing city. So even if you're going to face the problem, it's like trying to shoot a duck. You shoot ahead. Because, if you try and clear the plastic for 20 million people, by the time you get there, there are 22 million people, first of all. Secondly, when you talk about recycling, you have to have off-takers, because when you get the waste, what are you doing with it? As we know, manufacturing is moribund in Lagos right now. So who's the person who you're recycling the waste to? Who's taking it up? Who's using it again? This doesn't exist. That's why people send the plastic to China. The models for dealing with plastic is you either turn it into energy, like Singapore. Singapore, 2.8 million tons. Netherlands, Amsterdam, the city of Amsterdam, 1.7 million tons a year. This is equivalent to 2.8 million tons of petrol, or 1.7 million tons of petrol. In Amsterdam, AEN recovers 200 tons of metal, of gold, of copper, of lead, of aluminium every single month from the plastic, which they now sell into the open markets. They also recover new sand, which is used for construction. This is from the incinerating of plastic to produce power. And obviously, they charge people for the power they generate. Now, this is where we should be focused on, and this is where we should be moving to as a state, not recycling. It's just impossible.
Okay, if you say there are no off-takers for recycled plastics, now Canada and the EU, they are proposing a complete ban on plastics by 2021. India is contemplating banning the use of plastics by 2022. So if, as you say, we don't have a clear capacity to recycle, then why don't we ban the use of plastics? Or would that affect business?
Yes, it would affect business terribly. We cannot ban the use of plastic. We're 20 million people. In a city like Lagos, it just won't work. We don't have the, Nigeria in itself does not have the infrastructure, the manufacturing capacities to deal with our plastic. We're hot and we're wet city. How are you going to move around? How are you going to pack things? We don't have the manufacturing base to change into other products. We just are not there yet. We have to start with reducing the plastic from getting to the ocean.
Absolutely, and it's also argued that sometimes alternatives to plastic are even worse, so it's more of a case of how you manage your plastic use. And yes. I was reading an article over the weekend, and it was talking about how India have been using plastic to build roads. Yes. And I went, hold on a second, the governor of Lagos State has just declared a state of emergency on the state of roads, and this isn't even a model that, maybe I'm wrong, that I know of as to the government is exploring. And one would hope that initiatives like this are things that the Lagos State government is looking at taking on. Do you have any idea of whether these are initiatives that the government may actually veer towards? And to add to that as well, at PopBeachClub yourself, what are you doing to also help to reduce plastic pollution in the city, especially as one of your beach clubs is right on Tarkwa Bay, where plastic is flooded up every single day?
Yeah. Okay, to take those two things. First of all, when you speak about countries like India, these are countries that are deeply rooted in science.
Sorry, just to add to that, they built their first road from plastic, I think it was in 2002.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Yes, and they've moved on since then, and it's now, that's the new sand I was talking about that's used in construction and everything, and that's gotten from the waste of plastic. You see, you have to change the way you look at an economy. Like Lagos State has to change into being a science, engineering, solution-driven economy, which is what India and China and Asia and all these countries are. They're based on science, so we have to move to that level where that is how we view things. At PopBeachClub, single-use plastic is not an issue. We use bottles, we provide everything for everybody who comes in, so there's no need for you to bring plastic into Pop Beach Club. And also we produce our beachwear from recycled plastic. And, you know, as a way of showing people that there is an alternative. Each time you go into a shop to buy an item of clothing, you should ask, you know, is it made from recycled plastic? And you should demand, you know, we all have to do our own part in putting less pressure on the resources, you know, that are available to us as human beings. You have to reduce, you have to reuse, and you have to recycle. Those are the 3 R's that should be our, watchwords.
Well, I mean, why, you know, plastic pollution may be a major problem in a busy, sprawling, you know, city like Lagos. I'm sure that there are other environmental challenges. Will you rate those other challenges even more serious than plastic pollution? For example, industrial waste. I don't see anybody managing industrial waste well in Lagos. Open defecation, sanitation.
Which the UN wants to end by 25.
How do you rate all of these challenges?
These are all tied to plastic. Plastic is the #1 problem that is affecting us globally. The minute you start tackling plastic, you will tackle every other thing. Because the minute you start stopping plastic from getting into the ocean, you will be stopping every other thing from getting into the ocean. And since plastic is the #1 thing, that is what you go for first. Because the solution to our plastic problem is the solution to all our problems.
I don't get it. What's the connection between plastic solution, for example, and open defecation or sanitation?
Because the minute you start looking after your waterways, open defecation in Lagos, in a city like Lagos, is normally into the waterways. So the minute you start looking after your waterways, you are looking after your waterways. The minute you start stopping plastic from getting into your waterways means you're monitoring your waterways, which means you've got your eyes on your waterways, which means you're now taking control and taking charge and providing other alternatives to ensure your waterways are kept clean.
So it's sort of like a ripple effect situation that we're looking at here, encompassing all the environmental issues that we have in front of us. But let me ask you, with the current state of plastic pollution and other environmental scares across Lagos and Nigeria today, what exactly is the future looking like in terms of the pollution crisis that we have?
Well, we've got models of what can happen. You know, there are cities in Bangladesh, there are cities there, you know, where it has really gotten bad, and we've all seen the pictures. We can see the picture behind us right now and everything of what happens. The quality of life for everybody just gets affected. In Lagos State, we'll just, you know, flooding will be pronounced, you know, disease would explode, you know, across the city because the water isn't going anywhere, it's trapped, you know. The standard of living for everybody, and for those on the bottom of the pyramids, will, you know, they'll get affected. And it will just be a disaster, basically.
Well, I mean, apart from, you know, our focus on plastic solution, are there other things that the Lagos State government will need to do quickly? Perhaps maybe about sewage management, about drainage, you know, to check the menace of flooding, or to take a second look at urban planning.
Exactly. That's exactly what they need to do. There are 40,000 liters of water pumped into the Lagos Lagoon every second. And that's because we are the basin for the southwestern rivers. That's where they all drain into. So we need to take an overall view of our drainage of the waterways, and then we need to start fixing this problem and fixing it really fast, concentrating on plastic. And I think we should tie it to power.
Absolutely. We have to go on a break, but before we do, I'll just pose a question to you. What items can people recycle? People often get confused and don't really know which can be recycled and which can't. So we'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, we'll discuss what items people can recycle to give some more public awareness to our viewers. Do stay with us. You're still watching The Morning Show. Welcome back. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News, and Mr. Akintunde Disu, an environmental activist and the owner of PopBeachClub, is still here with us discussing plastic pollution and a number of other environmental issues that we're facing in Lagos State and City this current rainy season. So I was asking you, sir, about types of or items that people can recycle. So let's give some advice to the public so that the public are aware of what items really go into that recycling bin at home.
Well, the first and easiest thing is plastic bottles, as we can see. Those are really easy to recycle, and those are our big problem right now. And you can also do like paint containers and this thing, harder plastics, high-density plastic. Those are the two main things that are available for recycling. You can't do styrofoam, and you can't do nylon bags right now, plastic bags and things like that. So those are the things that we should concentrate on trying to take out of the system easily right now.
Well, you are an environmental activist. Have you had cause to engage the relevant authorities in Lagos State? And if so, how? And what have you been saying to them? And are they receptive?
Well, what we concentrate on is actually awareness. You know, what we concentrate on is awareness. And we've been running a campaign. We've crowdfunded our beachwear shorts. And we just try and allow people to understand that they're more venues of using plastic than we think, and we see. We write articles and things like that to just let people know what it is that they can do, you know, because it's a big problem, and just cleaning the beach is not going to solve the problem, or cleaning or clearing your gutter. You need to look more than that. We need government. We need government. Government must take.
You do this through the PopBeachClub?
PopBeachClub on Instagram. Yeah.
Oh, it's an online community?
We have two locations in Lagos, one in Takwa Bay and one in Elashe Beach, and we have the online community, which has over 20,000 followers, and where we push our message.
And what has been the feedback from the public?
It's the same as I think this is we can agree that this is a global problem, and everybody's aware, and it's something that affects, you know, the millennials are really in touch with this, and they are really trying to do something about this, as we saw with Greta, you know, during the United Nations climate conference. And it is they who have the future, and it's they who we need to incentivize in moving forward with this.
Absolutely. So it's more of a sensitization campaign than the PopBeachClub are running around plastic pollution in the city. But of course, every campaign has its key achievements so far. What would you say the key achievements of PopBeachClub's environmental campaign have been over the couple of years that the company has been up and running?
I'd say the production of the beachwear shorts, which showed people that we're a social enterprise and that you can think differently. And you know, when we did this was about 3 years ago, and it was before a lot of all the recycling and other companies that are around today came up, and it showed people that there's something else you can do. You don't just look at plastic and think, oh, you know, it's too much, I can't do anything. It's an opportunity for all of us to get involved with.
What's your assessment of Nigeria's attitude towards climate change issues? I mean, every year, every opportunity, the Nigerian government says, yes, we're committed to action on climate change. But when you look around, do you see, either at the federal level or at the state level, any kind of serious commitment, you know, about action on climate change?
For example, we are part of the Green Belt Initiative that's supposed to be holding back the Sahara, and we haven't really done anything on that. We haven't done much on that. Lagos State, as I said, hasn't really, you know, we say we're committed and all these things, but are we really? Are we really? I don't really see much that is being done. You know, I think, as we can see, we are number 8 plastic polluters in the world, and plastic is the main reason we have global warming.
We pay lip service to a lot of things, but let me ask you something. We spoke about the fact that no, we shouldn't ban plastic, right? And we know why banning plastic may have worse conditions for the country. But would you say that countries like Kenya that have taken that step that many would see as progressive and sustainable towards banning plastic are wrong for doing so? Or would you say that they just have a different climate under which they are working and it works for them, but it cannot work for a country like Nigeria?
Yes, banning plastic is the goal, but it has to be done in stages. You know, it has to be done in stages, and you have to look at your environment and what you're working with. So every city is different. There are cities in Nigeria that I think should just ban plastic, you know, and possibly, you know, but a city like Lagos, I think, would find it really hard to move on.
Well, I mean, beyond the plastics pollution, what are your biggest concerns about Lagos, a city that we are told by 2030, you know, would have, you know, much bigger, will become one of the largest cities in the world, and yet, you know, infrastructure does not seem to be developing at the same rate as the population.
Well, that is my biggest concern, that we are not focused on solutions, on community-driven solutions. You know, my biggest worry is that we just won't have the infrastructure on ground for the future, and we'll be facing collapse, basically. You know, we need to work on power, most importantly, because without power you can't do anything. We need to work on transportation. This is mass transportation. It should be this government's main goal, to get people off the roads so that we can flow. If the less people on the roads, the less plastic bottles they'll throw as they go along. You know, we need to focus on drainage issues. We need to focus on education. You know, we need to focus on all these things on a large government scale, not on ad hoc.
But let's take draining issues, for example. Why hasn't Lagos State been able to solve draining issues? Because it's very complex. There are several people who never had any planning permission offered to them for wherever they were going to build their house, etc., because that clearly does not exist. And come years later to realize that maybe their property has been built on drainage. The government can turn around and say, hey, we need to knock down this property because it's now on drainage. But then the government also know that they can't take away the livelihood of so many people that are not necessarily to blame for having built on drainage, because the government should have stopped that to begin with. So where is the starting point when it actually comes to cleaning out Lagos gutters? Because everywhere is flooded. The flooding is going to continue because we do not have proper planning across the city.
I think it's community-based solutions. So I think we need to go back to local governments, and then local governments need to go to, you know, break it down into their smaller groups, and those people need to find a way to solve their own problems. You know, if everybody starts getting together to solve this problem with the government's oversight, then we'll be able to face a problem, because it always seems as if it's too much until you break it down into small bits. There's a Kenyan proverb that the way to eat an elephant is a mouthful at a time, and that's how we have to face this problem.
Well, I mean, you see, the Lagos State government has even a special advisor on drainage. What's the name of this, our regular visitor, you know, who has been made special advisor on drainage? And people were laughing at him that, I mean, of all jobs, you know, the only job he could get is to come and be cleaning gutter. You know, so when you assess, because you keep talking about community-driven solutions, you know, do we get a sense that the average person in Lagos State thinks that, you know, plastic pollution is a big issue, or cleaning of gutters is something that affects them?
Yes, I think we all do. I think it's obvious we all do. You know, when you go around in the rainy season and you see people moving around, and I think it's something that affects all of us, and we know it's a problem. What we do need is guidance. And when I say community-based solution, what I'm trying to say is that with the help of the local government, empowering the community so that each person can find their own solution, because the solution in Ikeja is different from the solution in VI, which is different from the solution in Lagos Island or Festac. You know, so we need to break it down into each of those little individual communities so that there is ownership of the problem. that is how we will solve
Well,
it.
because, I mean, I asked you that question because I get a sense that, many Nigerians, they just...
don't even understand the seriousness.
Yeah, they just take life as it comes. I mean, it's rainy season now, so you have the flooding and all of that. So everybody will say, well, it's because of the rains. The rains will soon go away. And then once we leave the rainy season, everybody goes to sleep until the next rainy season, and then we begin the same kind of complaint.
Yes.
And then you talk about plastic pollution. The average Lagosian will say, well, what will it do? It's helpless. We have to use plastics.
Yes.
So that sense of apathy, alienation.
Because, yes, exactly. So that's why it has to be community, so that this is what we are all talking about, do you know what I mean, in our own little groups of the solutions to it. Like when we had Environmental Day, but it never, it was just like, okay, you do your own, everybody does their own. But imagine if that whole thing was now turned into like project-based. Each little community, each little estate had their own little projects that they were driving, and they were getting funding and grants from governments to help them lock this into the bigger picture. It's like, okay, what's the problem here? Where's the plastic piling up here? What are we doing about it? How are we in touch with LAMA? How are we in touch with all these agencies? This is what we need to do. We need to turn it into a positive for us.
And are there any policies that we don't have that could aid the governments in achieving this?
There are certain things, along collection of plastic. There are things like you were saying earlier, of just streamlining the kind of plastic that we collect. Government putting grants, making grants available or subsidizing these kind of things. So that there's just clarity in what it is we're trying to do and how we can go forward. I think that's and things we can measure, so that government can be able to say, oh, this year we collected 1 million tons of plastic and we did this with it. We have to be able to measure. We have to be able to collect the data and process that data so that we can get better.
Absolutely.
Well, when you are not campaigning for plastics pollution and finding a solution to it, what do you do?
I try and find a solution to education.
We need more people like you.
Anyway, thank you very much, Akintunde Disu. Great pleasure having you here. Thank you very much.